You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your Security Plus certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Ongoing vendor monitoring is the practice of continuously assessing a supplier's security posture throughout the entire lifecycle of the relationship, not just at onboarding. Too often, organizations perform due diligence only once, at contract signing, and assume the risk level remains static. In reality, vendors change staff, update systems, and shift supply chains, all of which can alter their risk profile. Ongoing monitoring ensures that any deterioration in controls or emerging vulnerabilities is detected early. By treating vendor oversight as a continuous process, organizations protect themselves from surprises and ensure third-party risks remain within acceptable bounds over time. Data sources for vendor monitoring are diverse and must be collected systematically. Attestations like SOC 2 or ISO certifications provide assurance of formal audits. Vulnerability disclosures reveal weaknesses in vendor-supplied software or hardware. Public intelligence feeds such as news of breaches or regulatory actions give external perspective. Telemetry feeds from integrated systems like log sharing or patch status updates provide real-time visibility. For example, if a vendor's attestation expires or a critical CVE is published for one of their products, the monitoring program flags it immediately. Using multiple data sources ensures that no single blind spot undermines the organization's oversight. Cadence is essential to balance real-time awareness with deeper reassessments. Automated signals, like threat intelligence or CVE feeds, provide continuous updates. These should be complemented by structured reassessments conducted quarterly or annually, depending on vendor criticality. For example, a critical cloud provider might be subject to quarterly reviews, while a lower-risk HR services vendor may only be reassessed annually. Establishing cadence ensures monitoring is not sporadic, but also avoids overwhelming staff with daily checks on less significant partners. The blend of continuous signals and periodic reviews creates a sustainable rhythm for effective oversight. Vendor scorecards are a valuable tool for consolidating monitoring data into actionable insights. A scorecard can include metrics such as patching timeliness, number of incidents disclosed, and whether current attestations are on file. These metrics can be rolled into a green/amber/red health rating that highlights the vendor's overall status. For example, a vendor with up-to-date certifications and no unresolved findings may be marked green, while one with expired attestations and unresolved vulnerabilities might be red. Scorecards make vendor risk visible at a glance, supporting prioritization and engaging vendors in structured improvement discussions. Remediation tracking ensures that findings from monitoring are not ignored, but actively resolved. Each open issue should be logged with an assigned owner, a target completion date, and evidence of closure. For example, if a vendor is flagged for slow patching of a critical CVE, remediation tracking documents when they committed to fixing it and whether proof has been provided. Without structured tracking, issues risk being acknowledged but left unresolved indefinitely. Tracking tools create accountability, allowing organizations to follow up systematically and escalate if progress stalls. Escalation paths define what happens when vendor failures persist or when critical issues arise. Initial concerns may be addressed with the vendor's technical team, but unresolved problems should escalate to senior management, procurement, or even legal teams. In extreme cases, escalation may include invoking contractual remedies or planning for substitution. For example, if a vendor repeatedly misses security SLAs, the escalation path may include considering an alternate provider. Clearly defined escalation ensures that risks are not allowed to accumulate unchecked and that leadership visibility increases as severity grows. Integration with procurement and contract management systems makes vendor monitoring enforceable. Procurement tools can enforce gating, ensuring that vendors without current attestations cannot renew contracts. Contract systems can flag when remediation deadlines tie back to legal obligations. For example, if a vendor fails to provide proof of secure data deletion at offboarding, procurement systems can block final payment until compliance is verified. Integration ensures that monitoring data translates directly into procurement decisions, making risk management part of everyday vendor management rather than a parallel process. Transparency expectations must also be communicated clearly. Vendors should be required to report security incidents proactively rather than waiting until customers ask. They should also disclose supply chain changes, such as new subcontractors or shifts in hosting providers, that could affect security. For example, if a vendor migrates data storage from one region to another, the customer must be notified to evaluate legal or compliance implications. By setting transparency obligations up front, organizations create trust and ensure they are not caught off guard by hidden risks in their supply chains. Metrics presented to governance bodies should highlight trends and overall exposure rather than granular detail. Useful metrics include the percentage of vendors currently compliant with security attestations, the average time it takes vendors to remediate findings, and risk trends for critical suppliers. For example, a board report might show that 90% of vendors are compliant, but only 70% of critical vendors patched within SLA timelines. These governance metrics provide oversight at the right altitude, enabling executives to make informed decisions about vendor investments, enforcement, or diversification. Collaboration with vendors is vital to ensure monitoring is not seen as punitive, but as a shared responsibility. Joint exercises, such as tabletop incident simulations, help both parties align on response roles. Shared playbooks define who does what during incidents. Agreed contact points ensure there is always a reliable line of communication. For example, having a 24/7 escalation contact at a cloud provider avoids delays in emergencies. Collaborative engagement fosters a partnership mindset where vendors are motivated to improve security rather than feeling scrutinized from the outside. Privacy and data sharing boundaries must be carefully defined, particularly when ingesting vendor telemetry or logs. Organizations must ensure that monitoring does not expose sensitive vendor data unnecessarily. Contracts should clarify what data is shared, how it will be stored, and how it will be used. For example, log sharing may exclude personal identifiers or be limited to metadata relevant for security monitoring. These boundaries protect both parties while still enabling meaningful oversight. Balancing transparency with privacy is key to building sustainable monitoring practices that respect legal and ethical obligations. A practical starter exercise helps learners operationalize these ideas. Create a simple vendor scorecard for your top 10 suppliers. Track their attestation status, such as whether SOC2 or ISO certifications are current. Include the last patch date for any in-scope components. Log open critical findings with their remediation status. Finally, summarize the overall health of each vendor with a green/amber/red rating. This exercise turns monitoring into a visible, structured tool, making it easier to prioritize discussions with vendors and highlight areas where risk reduction is most urgently required. By the end of Part 1, learners should see that vendor monitoring is not a one-time audit, but a continuous, collaborative process. Scorecards, remediation tracking, governance metrics, and escalation paths turn monitoring into a practical system of accountability. Privacy safeguards and transparency expectations balance oversight with trust. With these elements in place, Part 2 will explore automation, joint testing, offboarding, and dashboards that make vendor engagement measurable, sustainable, and resilient. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Automated feeds and APIs make vendor monitoring more efficient and scalable. Instead of relying on manual updates, Organizations can automatically pull attestations, match vendor software against published CVEs using SBOMs, and ingest public incident feeds directly into monitoring platforms. For example, if a vendor releases a new SOC2 report, an API connection could automatically update the vendor's scorecard. Similarly, automated vulnerability feeds can flag when a shared software component becomes exploitable. By automating data ingestion, organizations reduce human error, improve timeliness, and ensure their vendor risk posture reflects the most current information available. Periodic tabletop exercises with key suppliers are invaluable for validating joint incident response. These sessions simulate realistic scenarios, such as a vendor data breach or ransomware outbreak, so both parties can practice their roles and communication responsibilities. For example, a tabletop might test whether a vendor's escalation contact can be reached promptly at 2 a.m. Exercises expose weaknesses in coordination, clarify expectations, and build relationships before a real crisis occurs. By rehearsing together, organizations and vendors ensure that responses will be faster, smoother, and more collaborative when genuine incidents strike. Remediation SLAs and periodic status review meetings keep high-risk vendors accountable. Contracts should specify timelines for addressing vulnerabilities, such as patching within 14 days. Regular review meetings with vendor representatives provide opportunities to verify progress, discuss delays, and plan compensating controls if needed. For example, a vendor struggling to remediate quickly may agree to increased monitoring while they work on a fix. These ongoing reviews create a feedback loop, ensuring risks are tracked to closure rather than acknowledged once and forgotten. Structured engagement fosters accountability and strengthens partnerships. Conditional access and segmentation provide additional safeguards by limiting vendor exposure until remediation is validated. If a vendor fails to patch systems promptly, access to sensitive environments may be restricted until compliance is restored. For instance, a vendor account might be confined to a segmented network with minimal privileges until proof of remediation is provided. Conditional access enforces the principle of trust, but verify vendors remain able to provide services, but only within boundaries that minimize the blast radius of any unresolved issues. This approach reduces organizational exposure while maintaining continuity. Offboarding vendors securely is as important as onboarding them. Offboarding checklists should ensure that all vendor credentials, network accounts, VPN keys, and shared secrets are revoked promptly. Data exports must be completed according to contractual obligations, with confirmation that residual data has been securely deleted. For example, a terminated cloud storage vendor should provide a certificate of destruction for all remaining backups. Without thorough offboarding, organizations risk leaving behind dormant accounts or data remnants that adversaries can exploit. A disciplined offboarding process closes the door cleanly, reducing long-term exposure. Third-party risk dashboards make monitoring results visible to executives and governance bodies. These dashboards summarize overall vendor risk posture, allow drill down into individual vendors, and display trends over time. For instance, a dashboard might show that 85% of critical vendors are compliant with security attestations, with a downward trend in remediation times. Drill-down features enable executives to see which specific vendors are driving risk exposure. Dashboards transform monitoring into actionable intelligence, ensuring leadership has a clear, data-driven picture of third-party resilience and where to invest attention. Evidence collection is critical for both audits and accountability. Organizations should preserve attestations, correspondence with vendors, and proof of remediation activities. For example, an email confirming patch completion or a penetration test result verifying fixes should be archived. This evidence demonstrates due diligence during regulatory reviews or legal disputes, showing that vendor oversight was active and documented. Collecting and organizing evidence systematically reduces the scramble during audits and builds confidence that vendor risk is not just managed in theory but tracked in practice. Continuous monitoring can also uncover ecosystem-wide issues that affect multiple vendors. By correlating vulnerability data across many suppliers, organizations may discover that a common library or component poses systemic risk. For example, a single open-source library embedded in multiple vendor products could create broad exposure, as seen during the Log4j incident. Identifying these patterns allows organizations to escalate responses, coordinate across vendors, and treat the issue as a shared crisis rather than a series of isolated problems. Ecosystem awareness prevents fragmented responses and strengthens collective resilience. Vendor engagement playbooks provide a structured method for handling findings. A typical flow includes initial discovery of a risk, creating a remediation plan with deadlines, verifying fixes through evidence or testing, and reclassifying the vendor's risk level once issues are resolved. For example, a vendor initially flagged red for expired attestations might move to amber after submitting updated certifications, and then back to green once outstanding vulnerabilities are patched. Playbooks make vendor engagement predictable, consistent, and repeatable, reducing the variability that often undermines third-party oversight. Sometimes, persistent or severe vendor failures require escalation to contract remedies. This may involve financial penalties, suspension of services, or even contract termination. Triggers should include missed SLAs, repeated incidents, or evidence of negligence, such as failure to disclose a breach. For example, if a vendor repeatedly fails to patch within agreed timelines, the customer may invoke contract clauses to withhold payment until compliance is restored. Escalation ensures that unresolved risks are not tolerated indefinitely and reinforces that security obligations are legally binding, not optional. Training procurement and vendor managers to interpret security scorecards ensures they can ask the right assurance questions. These stakeholders may not be security experts, but with basic training, they can spot when a vendor's attestation is outdated, when remediation timelines are slipping, or when health indicators trend toward red. For instance, a procurement manager preparing for contract renewal might flag a vendor with repeated SLA breaches for additional review. Training ensures that security monitoring is not confined to specialists, but becomes part of normal business processes across the organization. Ultimately, vendor risk is not static. It is a continuous responsibility. Effective programs combine metrics, automation, and collaborative engagement to ensure vendors remain accountable and resilient. Continuous monitoring surfaces issues early, scorecards and dashboards keep them visible, and contracts provide enforcement when needed. Offboarding and contingency plans ensure risks do not linger beyond the relationship. When organizations treat vendor risk as an ongoing practice rather than a one-time event, they build stronger, safer partnerships and reduce their exposure to the evolving threats embedded in today's global supply chains. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.